of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all for coming. We were scheduled for last Wednesday. It was quite a week, weather-wise and otherwise, so but we're here today. Do you have anybody?
Nope.
Nobody for citizens forums. So our first order of business is our consent agenda. Are there any objections or corrections to the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, that's approved by unanimous consent. Are there any objections to moving item 8 up to be the first item, the superintendent update? Okay, we're going to do that, and we have Greta Holberdine is our student representative to the board again this year, so thank you, and she's going to do part of Allison's update as it pertains to stuff going on at the school, so.
Okay, and I'm going to let you start, Greta, since you've got some good things to celebrate.
Yeah, I'm back this year. I was here last year. I'm back.
Yay.
So, it's been a while. So, hi, I'm Greta. The Youth Apprenticeship Program, there's been such like a big participation at the high school level that NWTC submitted a grant and they're funding for 14 PHS students for their welding certificate program. So it'll cover like all their tuition, textbook, welding supplies at no cost to the district or students. So that's pretty cool for them. And another student was able to skip the wait list and start a full-time into the associate degree nursing program at NWTC. So there's been a lot of youth apprenticeship people getting a good head start. And there's been band concerts. Band and choir had theirs yesterday and this last Saturday. So those went very well. Basketball, wrestling all started, and those have been going well. The band's been playing a few pep band games, so I've been there working on cheering them on. DECA just had their food drive. That was successful. Got a lot of cans for pantry. Musicals started, rehearsals. It's Footloose this year, so rehearsals all for that started. And the student council had a blood drive this last Friday. And there were some open spots, but for the most part, they got a good participation. So that's basically all I really have.
Do you know for the for Pep Band, is there going to be an alumni night this year?
Yes, the alumni night is January 4th. If there's a way, is there a way you guys can advertise that?
We just did.
Come to that.
I'm not as dialed into the Music Booster program there anymore, but I'm assuming that the boosters have something out on their Facebook page or however they live, so.
Yes.
Anything you want to mention about one-act play? I understand that.
We went to, I was in that this year.
Yes.
We went to state, and that was very successful. We got, like, most of the awards that we could have got. I think we got all the ones that we were eligible for, so that was really cool. We got, like, all state, and we got, like, Critics' Choice, and a lot of individual actors got recognized for their talents, so that was very cool. So it's another successful year.
I think that program has really developed a reputation over the last couple of years, so
Yeah.
good job.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Anything else? Great, thank you, Greta. I just have a couple other updates around the district as well. As you know, I had shared with you before that Jenny and I were spending some time in each of the buildings, more than just visiting for an hour or two, but really getting in and spending a whole day or a couple days at a time. So we still are going to be visiting the high school, and that is in January, as well as Hillcrest. Those are the two buildings that we haven't been out at yet, but we spent a couple days at the middle school last week amidst all of everything else that was going on in the district. And I know I kind of sent you a heavy update when I updated you, but some of the other lighthearted things that took place at the middle school was quite enchanting, actually, and we really had a lot of fun with the staff and with Aaron and Pat, and we appreciate being in the middle school, and then just spending time with that middle-aged student is just kind of makes your day light. So that was a good part of last week, and everything else. I just want to give a public acknowledgement to my administrative team for last week, because we were really hit with quite a bit. And, you know, I know this is my second year here, but I did turn and say, is this kind of, I mean, is this how it's gonna be now that we're starting to be back to normal? And everyone's like, no, it's never been like this before. So I really just appreciate how everyone scooped together in time of crisis and just getting things rolling and how things went last week, especially then with weather thrown in there as well. So, and I have learned, and I have known this about my past school districts, but when you have a district this size, you can be over in Hobart and it can be beautifully sunny, and you can be here in the village and not be able to see. So that was really very interesting on that afternoon of having to be called for safety, and yet at the same time it taking quite a bit of time to just get out of the village because you couldn't even see the stop sign up at Glenbrook and Hammerback Dental, and then hitting Maplewood Meat and it being gray skies and no fog. So interesting, but a good lesson as well for all of us to take part in. So thank you to my administrative team, and thank you to Dina and everyone that just kind of scooped in and helped out where need be, and everyone at Hillcrest in Illinois. We just did a fantastic job. The teachers were great, and staff just did a phenomenal job with that. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge everyone. I have a few updates about the Radar Roadmap. We, in the midst of last week being kind of a crazy meeting, we did not push out the survey for feedback on the ESSER funding and on our Radar Roadmap, so that will be going out this week. We also are not meeting until January 12th with our stakeholder group, so we do have some extra time built in there. So that survey will be pushed out tomorrow, and then and that is to all of our parents that have, or families that have students within the district, and we will have that until January 5th, I believe, and then that will give us a week to get survey results put together so that when we meet with that stakeholder group, we'll have the data pulled for them, and they can look at that data in a concise manner. We have reached out to that feedback group that will be working together on the 12th, and so that'll be the evening of the 12th, and then we'll have that feedback to bring to you on January 26th for a more formalized plan for the Radar Roadmap that we can bring to you for, we'll recommend that you approve on the 26th of January. Have discussion and recommend it for approval. As far as COVID goes, I know that everyone is, DHS released just some new guidelines yesterday, not necessarily in line with what needs to happen in schools, but just in the public safety setting with the new variant Omicron. We do know that it's traveling at a very quick rate. You can watch, we're just keeping a very close eye on it. We're averaging around 5 new positive cases a day within the district. We are still having people call into our COVID line. We are not moving or shifting from what we are doing currently, but we are keeping a close eye on things. I did, very late in the day today, receive an update from our state superintendent, Dr. Jill Underly, and I haven't read it thoroughly enough. It came in at 10 minutes to 4, so I'd like to spend a little time reading through it, and then I will send this out to the board in an update tomorrow, just highlighting some of the things that she's discussing. Most of it is going back to what we're grounded in of our, those 3 goals of keeping our doors open, keeping kids here in school, and keeping everyone safe. So we'll keep an eye on things. I think that it'll be very telling here in the next couple of weeks, and just encouraging, in the DHS public safety update as well as in her update, just those things as people are gathering for the holidays, be safe, and they're still talking about test if that will help us determine, make sure that you stay home when you're sick, and if you're positive, don't gather. So that's the biggest update on that. Well, more information for you once I've taken a little bit closer read on that, and I'll some highlights out to you, as I said, tomorrow. And I really don't have too many updates. I'll just give a reminder on the facilities. We will be meeting, we'll have information for you on January 27th. In the beginning of January, we'll be meeting with our principals again with Gray Architects to go over some of those options or concepts for each of the buildings. And then they will be presenting and talking with you as a unit on January 26th. I also want to just remind you that we will not have a board workshop in the beginning of January because we're having a stakeholder meeting on the 12th instead. And we really don't have anything that would need to come together as a workshop because we kind of need that time to be working with the architects and with our building administrators on those concepts that we're working on. And I also did receive information from Bill Foster with School Perceptions, and I sent in the signed agreement to work with them for our community survey, stakeholder survey for moving forward. So that's kind of where we're at. Mark, is there anything that I missed or any other update that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you covered them all.
Okay.
Did you want any board members at the ESSER thing?
Yep, Michael is there for sure on January 12th for the ESSER stakeholder. You said you were.
Sounds familiar.
Okay.
Well,
Marked you down.
I got-
We
I
do
got
have him now,
volunteers.
right?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, I
okay.
do.
And if there's, we could take another one if another board member wants to just let Jenny know. But if there's going to be several of you, I have to know that as well because we can't have a walking quorum.
right.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for my superintendent update. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Personnel report. We have Ally joining virtually if there's any questions. It's document number 3.
We have 3 new hires that we want to welcome to the district. And thank you to the board last month for approving the addition of the EL teacher who did practice on. So thank you.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Because you, okay, sounded
I
right.
got it.
Any discussion on the personnel report? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 4, the budget report.
Just since I wrote the memo, the auditors did issue our financial statements, so the board's been furnished with a hard copy. We received them electronically today, so I'll get them updated on the website. But other than that, nothing further in the memo. From an operations standpoint, we do have immediate openings in food service. So if anybody has any referrals, they can reach directly out to me this week. Positions are posted, and a couple of business office members in kitchens today, so hoping to get those positions filled. So please spread the word if available.
You said the audit will be going out.
We'll post it on the business page as well, so.
I always go right to the back of this because this is where
Sure.
the findings are. So these are the same 2 findings that are in there every year because we don't.
No, one is a recurring finding. The initial finding is preparation of financial statements because we don't employ somebody who can prepare these financial statements.
That's a
There is
conscious
one.
decision.
Food service was pulled. There was a purchase contract for dairy milk where we did check with vendors, but the auditors did not see that we had formal quotes, although we went with the same vendor we've been using. Because it's food service and federal funds, those should have been formal quotes and approved. So there is a finding. I've discussed it with them. We did the bids this year. It was mostly just due to a COVID year that food service was a scramble and did formally bid milk prices. So it's been done this year and corrected.
Okay.
So.
Mark.
I know you all haven't had a chance to go through it all, so.
In terms, on your memo, in terms of the relief funding that came in from the governor,
Yeah.
you said that you would be reporting back when there was additional guidance on that. Do you have an idea of when there may be guidance?
No,
that funding?
we don't. I would say within the next month at least. DPI will tell us where we need to record the funds. Right now, the issue is you have the additional funding come in and they don't want it to impact your general aid. So they're trying to make sure you know where to record it. But as far as guidance on how the money is to be spent, I don't believe there will be any coming from it. Since the governor's initial announcement, it was as schools see fit. So, this year's budget's already in place. We really don't have, we have immediate needs, but nothing exactly. So it will go into our budget planning process in February. But waiting on a little guidance from DPI just as they tell us where it needs to be recorded and how, so.
So
So is it safe to say that if they don't give us any guidelines on how to spend those dollars, do we have specific items related to COVID that we're looking at, or will it just be funds that we can allocate towards what we're looking at doing for?
Yeah, I would say because, you know, the ESSER funding is so COVID heavy, that we really don't have immediate COVID needs that this funding would go for. This really was to make up for the governor's proposal of the $250 increase per student. Obviously, it's not that, I think it's $130 per student. But in the memo, I wrote that really department budgets are one area that have been cut in recent years and not replaced. So if you look at doing that and increasing it over 2 years, that funding can be carried over. So really discussion, you know, the other big one is going to be staffing with CPI being high and benefit renewal coming in. Part of the discussion for everyone would be, can those funds offset probably a large increase that we're looking at for health insurance to, you know, so that employees are picking up a large portion of it. So there are needs, so.
Other questions? Okay, moving on, policy services update. This is something we began discussing a couple meetings ago. I think you're all familiar with the background, so I don't know where we want to go with this. Ally, is there something you want to?
Yeah, I can just, I mean, Barb and I have had some conversations. We have had conversations as you know, here within the board meeting. I've had a lot of conversations with the administrative team. I think that, you know, we're ready to say, we haven't had a whole lot of questions come forward from you, from the board to us specifically about switching over to a platform, except that, you know, would it streamline things and make things easier? No matter how we look at policy, it's going to be work. And I think I've come, you know, to the time that yes, we understand that there is an outlaying of money that comes along with Neola, but the strength of Neola is the idea that there is a platform. These are vetted policies. We're not going to have to do a lot of that background work. And at this time, we do recommend that the adoption of Neola policies with not including the administrative guidelines, because I think that was a question at the last meeting. And when you think of the administrative guidelines, that's the processes that personalizes your policy to what the district's needs are. And that would be the work that, you know, that we could lean on, that we have a lot of that done already. And it does personalize things here for the district. So I am recommending that the adoption of Neola policy.
Questions? Action?
I move to approve the adoption of the Neola policies as recommended.
I'll second that. Questions?
I don't have a question, I just want to make the statement that we all still have to be involved and know what's going on with them policies. We can't just say Neola's doing it and not ever look at it again. Because that's not,
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Barbara.
Why not use Neola for then the admin rules as well, if you're recommending that?
We feel that our admin rules and our guidelines that we use with many of the policies are solid. We always can get guidance from Neola on that as well. But having the solid policy in place and being able to have being able to use our guidelines that we have right now, which are structured for what we do here in the district, I think will give us all a sense of comfort. And I think that it will guide our work, and it's actually, you know, when you work with a consultant, you can talk with them about that, and many times they'll ask you that question, well, what do you currently do in the district? And then since we have those guidelines, our own guidelines in place, I think we should be in good shape.
and the timing is okay, but even with taking on the referendum question thing, you're gonna have time to do both?
We will have time to do both, and we can structure that when we want to start the work.
Well, I usually fall on the side of adopting the administration's recommendation absent some compelling reason in the contrary, and I really don't see any here because I mean, you're the ones that are familiar with it. I think we have seen instances, particularly over the last 6 or so months, where we've seen some, problems with our policies and development that have sort of, come to light where things need to be cleaned up, so. Any other questions, discussion? We do have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Anything else on that? Moving right along, we are at item 6, staffing proposal, which there's a couple. I thought there was a document.
I
There we
believe
are.
I believe
There's
that's me, sorry, that's staffing proposal for early childhood. On there, just kind of explaining as far as early intervention being key, looking at the uptick of referrals and evaluations. We're, again, trying to be proactive and make sure that our early childhood students and 4K students are getting the best quality education. We know that when we're meeting our kids where they're at, that sometimes is a little bit more involved at that early level, so that's why I brought this proposal to you tonight. Anybody have any questions?
Is that gonna be a position that's used spread out, or is it one person in some building, or?
So that is, I'm gonna say to be determined, depending upon the candidate. We've had some conversations with different restructuring, and really ultimately, we're looking at what's best for the students.
Just get a body and then see what works in? Okay.
Somewhat, yes, and really we want as much consistency for the students first. As adults, we need to be flexible and that may adjust, but we want to make sure the kids are getting their needs met first. So kind of the long and short of that, yes, we would look at the person and where they're needed.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the staffing change proposal as presented. It's document 6, I kind of call it. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Item 7. Now we have some stuff to present, which is also document 7, building goals and action plan, which is springboarding off our discussion from either the last business meeting.
All right, so we have a crew that will help present tonight, so different people will be stepping in depending on the topic. So Curtis Sufka, principal at Glenbrook, will help us. Steve Linson, associate principal at the high school. Michelle Lowenhagen, who is a learning support teacher and dean of students at Sunnyside, and she was also working on her practicum, or currently is working on her practicum for her director of instruction license. So she needed some hours and some experiences, and we said, perfect opportunity to have you present to the board. And then Lindsay Mattice and myself and Patrick Fullerton, our middle school principal, will also be joining us for different parts. So, and then we'll field questions, so don't hesitate to ask. Everybody kind of is involved because it's their goals and action plans that they're part of. So if you remember a couple of meetings ago, we kind of showed you this framework, and we talked about that when we were rolling out the data to you and showing you our state data as well as our district assessment data. We were really getting a feel where we are now and how we got there, and so that also included some of our demographic data as well. So tonight, really, between all of us that are presenting, we're going to take you through where do we want to be. So that's kind of our goals and our action plans and how we're going to get there. And then is what we're doing making a difference, so the evidence or the measurements that it would take to know that we're being successful in that work that we want for the continuous improvement. So you've probably heard us make a change, probably when we were in the midst of COVID, and we did some of these presentations, or we had some of these conversations. We talked a lot about learning loss and showed you some graphs and charts that talked about students having learning loss. And really there's been a change. It doesn't matter if it's on the federal level or on the state level or just different organizations are really talking about unfinished learning and it not being learning loss, because the kids didn't really lose the learning. It's just, we didn't get them to the point of where they needed or where they should have, our benchmarks as they ended out the year. And so I work a little bit with Jack Lynch, who is the executive officer of Hohenmilf and Harcourt. I have a chance usually twice a year to work with that whole group out of Boston. And so he really shared some of this information with us. And I kind of like his first sentence, that learning didn't stop during the pandemic. It just took new forms, and we should be calling it unfinished learning, not learning loss. And then he goes in to talk about, and we've shared this with you before, that some of our most fragile students, or our students that probably had that most of that unfinished learning, really are the students that are from our high need communities. And so that's why when we meet with the stakeholder group and we have those types of conversations, we're going to be talking about what we can do to support those students with those ESSER funds, the 20% that has to go towards unfinished learning. And so just wanted to share that with you, that it's kind of a little bit of a shift from what we've been saying in the past and probably the last few months. You've probably heard us talk more about the current reality of being unfinished learning. So last year wasn't back to school as normal, nor was this year, and so different things that really helped us focus on students and on that learning and on that unfinished learning is that collaborative time that we have in our professional learning communities. As we visit schools, or as principals come together in meetings, or even in conversations with teachers, they really talk about that. Had it not been for that collaboration time of being able to come together to talk about what their students are doing, how they're doing, what they're not mastering, then what can they do for those students as a team of people, and to move those students around to meet their needs based on those. And so definitely that focus on collaboration is so important. We've also, on those power standards, we had to quickly create our power standards in English language arts because we had new standards that had came out, and we hadn't had an opportunity with our teachers to do that, so subgroups of people came in to do that. We had that in math for K-5, and our teachers said that's just easier because it was there in front of them. But when we didn't have those power standards and you have all of these standards facing you, you have to kind of figure out what's the most essential for these students to know and be able to do. Using that data then to drive the instruction and to think about, okay, we can't focus on everything, but our data is saying these are the most important standards and benchmarks that we need. What are we going to do to support those students? And then one of the things that we did the year before that we heard from staff was something valuable of doing a flashback and a flash forward. And so taking a look at what students might have not had, what prerequisite skills they should have had, and then how the next grade level was going to start at that point or integrate those into their daily lessons that they were doing. You've seen this before, so then we made some changes this year. Our 3D team was really our guiding coalitions, which are part of our professional learning communities. They came together in August, and then they led their whole staff in September through the work of discovering, deciphering, and delivering. And really, you've heard us talk about these 3 big ideas of professional learning communities, and so then we use that to really drive the changes in our 3D vision time. So really a focus on that learning, building that collaborative culture, and then a focus on those results centered around those 4 critical questions of what do we want students to know and be able to do, how are we going to know that they know it, and then what are we going to do if they haven't mastered it or if they have mastered it.
So what you see here are a couple of our district goals for this year, and this isn't new information. We have shared these with you before. So this kind of sets that big picture that our building principals and their teams thought about. What are our district goals that help kind of drive the goals that they come up with at that building level. So in literacy, you can see we're looking for 70% of our different subgroups of students to meet that targeted growth. Subgroups because sometimes a big percentage can hide or mask a problem that's happening at a subgroup level. So yeah, 70% is making it. You drill down into our students with disabilities, oh, they're really lagging behind in that growth. So making sure that we're taking a look at all of those different subgroups and really the different kinds of data that we gather. So grade level data, district data, the state assessments, all of the things that we gather. In math, it's a very similar goal, but we're looking at that 80% of all students. So same thing, looking at our subgroups and the different kinds of data that we collect. Then we also have our social emotional learning goal. So that is split a little bit between what we have for our students and then what we have for our staff, but very similar. So we want our students to feel connected to staff members and that they have a relationship and someone that they can turn to. And we're really measuring that by taking that dipstick in the fall, so measuring how our students are feeling then and then comparing that to our spring data and seeing if we've seen some positive growth there. Similar with our staff, we want them to feel connected to each other as well as to the different administrators in their building and other support staff. So again, taking that dipstick in the fall and then checking that against the spring data to see if that grew through some of our SEL efforts. And then finally, we have a goal related to 4Cs, which is a little bit like they were able to customize that a little bit within the building level. So we want our teachers to keep using the technology tools and strategies that they learn through doing some of that hybrid instruction or that virtual instruction. So keep using those tools and using it in one of the following contexts. So student collaboration, discussion, sharing of learning, these various things here. And then within the schools, they were able to pick one of those to really concentrate their goal area on. So those are our district goals. But then if you wanted to drill down further and see, you know, what does that look like specifically at Fairview or Glenbrook or the high school, those are linked there for you to be able to take a closer look at. But now Curtis is going to come on up and share some more specifics related to some of those actions.
So professional learning communities, it's something that's really the district has been behind now for a number of years. Really a lot of what we're doing throughout the district, the taking action and learning by doing have definitely been book studies. With regarding the bullets that are up there, Jenny had talked about those guiding coalitions. We've really been working on a school level to really develop those and lead us through the whole professional learning community journey. Joe Kademi, you see his name up there. He's been great about coming and meeting our schools, kind of where we're at. Every school is a little bit different along that journey. But really the emphasis is making sure that we're staying kind of connected to the right work, that we're doing the stuff that matters for our students. He also refers back a lot to these two books that you see that are up here. And again, those have been district book studies. So again, it's nothing new, but it's kind of like that, hey, you read something and now we're gonna see it, you know, put into action, which has been great. Talked a little bit about that social emotional learning piece and really professional learning communities. I know I speak for Glenbrook. They would tell you that if we weren't collaborative in nature, or that we went to survive the pandemic. I mean, with all of the either the hybrid or the virtual and what they're continuing to do now. I mean, collaboration is just key to be able to meet all of our students' needs. And then really the PLC Institute, it's just a huge success to have that many employees there for that. It just helped generate so much information coming into this year and really just kind of helped build a lot of that clarity around professional learning communities, staying focused on the right work, doing what matters for our students. Kind of takes us into math. With regards to math, again, lots of bullets up there, kind of some of the key takeaways. K through 12, we've got power standards, which have been terrific, especially coming into this year. Jenny talked a little bit about the flashback, flash forward, and really what that allowed us to do was using the data and the power standards and the scope and sequences that we have developed. It really allowed our teachers to meet our kids where they were at. Hey, we didn't get to that last year, or we had to rush, or that was done a little bit light. These kids are going to need a little bit more work on that to make sure that we're building that solid foundation so that we can continue to move forward on. Got some awesome stuff up here like the college prep math. You'll see stuff with CFAs. Those common formative assessments have been super big for us to be able to create those assessments based on those power standards so that we're kind of using real-time data with our students to create flexible groups, to provide interventions, and again, meet our students where they're at. We were actually able to look back, in some of the scores, like with regarding forward exam and other assessments like that as well, even coming into this year with some of the early fast bridge. It was really nice. Again, I can speak for Glenbrook, where our teachers were able to kind of take a look at the data, and it's really supported all of the hard work that went into creating power standards, the flashback, the flash forward, being able to look at, and it's kind of that reinforcement that yes, this is the right work. Really inspired a lot of our teachers, and really, I know across the district, to really start, I guess, maybe ramping up a little bit on those power standards and common formative assessments with regards to literacy, just because we felt like we were definitely getting bang for our buck, and there's nothing more rewarding than that. You put in the work, and then you kind of see it come to fruition. We still have miles to go, and they're changing standards all the time, but even with that, we don't have to start over. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Again, a lot of the power standards will stay kind of as they are. Again, just a lot of really good work going into math, and you can see it.
As Michelle makes her way up here, I would add on at the bottom of the slide, it talks about Advantage Math Recovery, or AVMR. So last week we had our first 2 days of the 4-day training, limited on subs, so we had to cut our group back because just having a difficulty finding those subs. So we had 20 staff members that were our learning support teachers and special ed teachers, and then 3 of our 6th grade math teachers. And then they added other people from other districts to join, and helping to save on some of the cost of that. And then they'll have 2 more days in January. And our goal, because teachers who have came from other districts have been trained, so De Pere, Ashwaubenon, Green Bay, Oshkosh, all do have their teachers trained in AVMR. It's been something that they've requested, and we've just never had the money to do it. And now, because of the ESSER funds, we have the ability to do this training. And so the 6th grade teachers were pumped to get back to their building. They said, I'm going to do this assessment on these students right away. It's really what we call a tier 2 intervention, and so it's classroom teachers doing it. And we've heard a lot of excitement as teachers that were at that session. They said, we can't wait till other teachers are getting trained in it as well. So, and then on that slide, it also talks about a math coach. So you're looking at a person who agreed to be our math coach in the district. Pretty intensive training we've learned. So tonight you approved a limited term LST. Michelle started this, and it's been about 3 days a week, 3-hour sessions, very intense, and we did not realize that's how intense it would be, but she says it's been very good, and so we had to figure out a way to get her help and support, and so that's why you saw that on the agenda, is to free her up to do Dean of Student things as well as math interventions. When you have to have 100 hours of math interventions, videotaping students, working with them on the assessments, and so we're excited to have Michelle accept that task and be our math coach for us, our math
Had some
champion.
great conversations already with collaborative teams and talking about just that approach for math and being able to provide that for students. So very excited about the opportunity to be able to bring this to the district for Pulaski for our kids. So thank you for that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about literacy. So in the midst of the pandemic in the spring of 2020, Wisconsin released the revised English language arts standards. And so we have had grade level committee meetings to gain an understanding of those standards with that rollout. And within that, being able to go back and revise our power standards to make sure that they're aligning with those new ELA standards, and being able to unwrap them and really get crystal clear on what students need to know in the area of literacy. And then also being able to develop together as a team those common formative assessments to make sure that the students are learning what we want them to learn. And if they're not, how can we support them with interventions? And if they are, how can we help extend or enrich that learning for them? So really diving into that. Also, we've had a foundational literacy committee that met this summer and really dove into 2 different books looking at best instructional practices for those foundational skills for literacy, and being able to work together and have really great conversations about how we teach foundational skills for students and what are those best practices for them. So that's really exciting as we are rolling that out within those with K-3 grade level bands. And then we also have been looking at our instructional resources and how do those align with our standards, and making sure that we have an adequate emphasis on the power standards. And our 6-12 teachers had an opportunity to do some professional learning with Kelly Gallagher this summer. And Kelly Gallagher wrote the book 100 Days, you can see it up on the screen, and our 9-12 teachers are
participating in a book study with that as well. And then finally, we have kind of expanded our pilot of language skill-focused resource, Patterns of Power, within our 3-5 classrooms across the district and also our 6-8 classrooms across the district. So some very exciting things happening in literacy.
Four C's, collaborate, create, critical thinking, and consuming content all are the 4 C's. One of the things that Pulaski has done historically with these goals has been looking at utilizing technology as a resource to promote skills that students are going to need in the 21st century. The reason why I bring that up is the fact that Pulaski was ahead of the game when it came to technology, which probably helped us get through the pandemic. I'm not saying that it was perfect. We had a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, but when I talk to my colleagues in neighboring districts or other parts of the state, where we were at with technology helped minimize learning loss or the unfinished learning, as Jenny had shared. And really a lot of our goal for this year is to continue moving that stuff forward. Our goal is about taking all those lessons we learned, because teachers were trying a lot of new things, trying to figure out maybe a new, I'm going to use the word gadget, to engage students in that learning in a virtual environment. Some of those things can be still done in person too, using that technology. So ultimately, moving those strategies and things, enhancing them, revising them, and then ultimately trying to improve learning around those 4 things. So other things that also fall underneath this umbrella too is the classroom redesign, which Amy and Jenny shared a lot about at the last meeting or in recent meetings. And then also developing our relationship with Between the Lakes and EKEEL for virtual learning opportunities, so we can maintain students for online learning, virtual learning in our district, and not have them open enrolling into others. So a lot of the work's already been, the foundations have been there, and we're just continuing to revise on that work. That?
Awesome, thank you, Steve. As everyone knows, Lara, in her position in student services, oversees a lot with SEL, and her and I had to arm wrestle to see who would do this slide, and she won, so she said I could do it, and so I appreciate that opportunity. But in the realm of that, if you look at the pictures, and I think this one hits, I think, all of us more than we even thought it would when it came down to the foundation of all the things that we've already talked about above. And it's about focusing on those relationships and the development of those. And I can even say, like, put my dad hat on, and I can think about my own kids when it came to the pandemic. I'm like, oh, kids are resilient, they'll be fine. And teachers are resilient, and we're all resilient. And that time has been hard on all of us. And I think that is the key to help us move a lot of the things that we've talked about head forward. And I think that has been a focus of all of our school buildings, our district office team, Lara with her department, and all of our teachers working with our kids. And ensuring that our students feel comfortable and that they have a staff member that they can rely on, that they feel comfortable with, and really the importance of having that focus. And we always knew that was true, but I think in the last year and a half, it's become even more evident and important, and I think we all realize that. So this has been exciting work. We focused on those life skills of respect and responsibility and perseverance and teamwork. We've done a lot of work at the elementary and middle school level on that. The high school is focusing on that, coming over as we continue our transition with, how do we help kids get better? I can see it in the middle school where, 8th graders, they haven't had the traditional 6th and 7th grade experience to learn things. 4th graders haven't had that 2nd and 3rd year, 3rd grade ability to learn things, not academic necessarily, it does include that, but just how do you line up and go to recess, and how do you do lunch, and how do you do all those kind of things, and we're having to reteach, or I shouldn't even say teach, it's unfinished learning, or, as Jenny had said, and we're needing to do that. And with that, we have to be very cognizant of our staff. Our staff have, making sure that they're in a good place and feeling, invested, and they're feeling appreciated, and just that whole mental health focus for our staff to be able to have that trickle down to our kids. And I think we really have zeroed in on that. Some of the things that are coming up that are exciting, like event pieces too. At the bottom, you see, continuing with the Read Across America themes on social and emotional learning that happens at the elementary level. Kind of moving up one at the middle school in February, we're bringing, you may remember that about every third year, we bring in a guest author, and we work with our student council and our hub and have some experiences there, and we're bringing a lady by the name of Lydia Blackman Lowry, who she was 15 and she was on the march from Selma to Montgomery and Bloody Sunday and Turnaround Tuesday, and if you Google her, just had some real neat experiences as a teenager. She was one of the 300 or 320 people that made that march, and so she's coming in, and we're going to do a book study through our curriculum in English language arts or social studies, and present to the kids about how we treat each other, and in a very positive kind of messaging there. And then the high school, and it's at the end of February, early March, Steve Pemberton doing a book study there, or share in regards to his work, and a chance, and you can see the read that they're going to be doing as well. But just keeping that at the forefront, I think, as we continue to work with our kids, work with our staff, to make sure we're in a socially, emotionally place where that we're building those relationships and learning and growth can occur.
So that opens it up for questions of any of the individuals that are here that you might want to know more about their goals and action plans or the information that they shared.
I do have a question. Way back when we first started looking at this, you brought it to us, I don't know what, 5 to 8 years ago. There was a statement that at the beginning, you learn what it is, but eventually, when it really works is when the whole district is living it. Are we living it?
So I think you're talking about like that we just don't
The
create
PLC.
these goals and action plans and they sit there and,
And they feel it's a part of them, not just something they have to do? It's our way of life, it's the way we do it?
I'd
Their
open that
front
question
page
up
on,
to.
like our collaborative teams that meet, like it's right there, it's front page on their agenda, they go to it, their data is linked to it, so they talk about it, it comes up all the time, and I know what you're saying, but it's not a huge report that gets filed away somewhere.
No, that's not what I meant, yep.
Okay, but they know.
Because
a
like,
lot of our-
anytime you bring up something new, it's like, oh no, that's just another thing we have to do. But if you get to live it, that it's part of our, part of you.
Yeah, even our like SLOs that our teams create, through educator effectiveness, those SLOs are now, it's awesome because they're tied right to our building goals. Our guiding coalition this year kind of presented a lot of those goals to the school, kind of an umbrella, and then within our individual grade levels, they created the steps and the learning targets to achieve those goals at the end of the year, which was something that, everybody's vested in. It wasn't something that we dropped off on their desk and said, hey, here's your goals for the year. They've actually worked hard to create them and have said, this is how we're gonna achieve them, this is how we're going to know that they're being met. So yes, our teachers are very much a part of these goals, which is awesome to be part of, it really is.
Great, thank you.
We have teachers here, so if Michelle or Jess, if you.
Even the art teacher is on PLC with my art teacher colleagues, and we talk about, how can we support our students right now? I know our goals at Sunnyside for these different areas, and I have to say, how can I support math and literacy and the arts? So all teachers are on deck and on board, all means all in our school, and so, yeah, it's kind of neat to be the art teacher, but know the big picture when it comes to these things, because I have a student and I want to know, how can I help as an art teacher? I have a child in the district, but how can I also help as an art teacher get that kid to learn reading maybe through some tricks that I have, or math, whatever it is. Seeing that kind of go across collaboration too with different teachers, not just in our own department, so.
I think that's the biggest difference that we had from 8, 9, 10 years ago is the collaborative teams and the work that they do. And it doesn't matter if you're at an elementary, high school, or the middle school, is the value of that. And I think that's where, when I was clicking through some of the action plans and stuff, it's really about that process. It's not, I think in the past it did feel more like a check the box and put something down and some events that we're gonna do, and you know, but now it's a K-12 focus. And I think that that has made a huge difference for us, as well as in our teachers, which then, obviously, that just rolls down to our kids.
And I think just having, just the way the presentation has been brought forth also shows a district vision instead of just, this is what I'm doing at Glenbrook with my teachers, right? This is what I'm doing at PHS with my teachers and students. This is, Curtis knows what's happening at the middle school and what's happening at the high school. And that's a shared vision, and this is how we do business, right?
That's what I was getting to, is it?
Yeah, and it is, and it's still work, right? But you work, when you do the right work, it's always a little bit more, but that's what we're about here. So it's great work, and it's great to be part of a district that's doing this work.
I don't know if I can interject, but having been a teacher 12, 13 years ago and not really having, I'm not gonna say much use for my professional development time, but it was a struggle. Like, there wasn't really any kind of agenda, so to speak, but now we know what we're doing when we meet. To say that when I leave, the next group of teachers that come in are gonna have something in place, that's when it's gonna outlive us. And I think that's what I looked for when I first started in the district, and it was a clean slate. Here, you can do what you need to do or figure it out, but we're doing a disservice to teachers if we're not including them into everything we already know.
Mark and I had an opportunity to join their art meeting because they were trying to figure out some things on their report card with their power standards and so forth. And when we finished that call, they were like excited and they wanted to work on it like right away because they were so excited. But then they got together for a weekend to hash it out and pound it out. And because what we were finding is we couldn't get them a sub because they were like, can you get us a sub? And I'm like, I can pay you, like I'll give you some curriculum hours. And they were like, good. And so what, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, you guys got together and hammered it out and sent the doc, and it's pretty neat to see the work that they did as a team.
And I think another piece of this too, when we were in the middle school last week, we were in a classroom and you could see the imprint of what was happening in science, in ELA, and what, I mean, you can see that the collaboration is spreading throughout. And that's when you have full engagement for kids, it's connected, the teachers are connected, and that's when true learning will happen. So, pretty neat thing to see happen.
Well, I know to your point, when we started the whole PLC journey, and I don't know how long ago that was, I mean, the big message was this can't be just another thing
Right.
that teachers have to cram into their day, just another meeting. And we not only evolved beyond that, but we're like a model that other districts look at. And just what's interesting to me is when I did my student teaching, so this is a long time ago, this is like 30 years, the thing that stuck out to me and why I wasn't really interested in it as a career was it was so isolating, right? And I was working with another teacher as a student teacher, but I don't think we had a departmental meeting or a meeting with any other classroom like that whole semester. And it was like feeling like you're on an island. So when I hear the stuff that's going on, like across classrooms, across buildings, and across the district, it's great, and it reflects best practices in business as well. Because that's the type of thing that I'm doing now. That a lot of us are doing now where we work in collaborative teams. So it all makes sense.
A couple of weeks ago, whenever we were that presentation about the data that we had recently gotten, we discussed, we had a lot of bar charts that we saw in terms of either the levels of advanced students versus proficient, basic, below basic, or meeting expectations, exceeding, below exceeding. Since now we have everybody from different schools here, I'd like to hear your kind of input as to how you're addressing that unfinished learning piece or that continued learning piece for those different levels. So from that lower level of below basic or not exceeding to get them up into that level where we want them to be. And then when you're at the top and you're at the advanced, how to get those people that are close or there to continue on that trajectory without losing that momentum. What are the interventions or the groups? Curtis, you mentioned flexible groups and interventions. So at the elementary level, can you just give us an idea of how that's being addressed?
The other thing that's been great within the district is a platform called EduClimber, and we've been able to take a look and produces beautiful reports. And I think one of the people I work with, one of my colleagues, said it best. Like, we're not looking at percentages and numbers anymore. Like, we're looking at students and faces. Like, these are the numbers represent the kids in your classroom. So like, we have a really big at Glenbrook. We had a really big kind of gap with literacy for our current 5th graders this year. Our learning target for that was specifically to address those students. And I want to say it was like maybe like day 3 of the school year. And we were already meeting with learning support teachers, trying to figure out the flexible grouping, waiting for that first assessment piece, whether that be Fontes and Pinell or Fastbridge, to be able to identify kids in flexible groups and be able to offer support through what we call target time. Every elementary has a 30-minute intervention piece. Our 2nd graders, it was just in an IEP this afternoon, we were talking about 2nd grade. They came to us and said, we want to try to maximize a little bit of this time. Are we okay to kind of move outside the box? We actually want to do 2 interventions during target time. We want to expand that to 40 minutes. Our 2nd grade students, it's so awesome to see. They leave their homeroom to go to one teacher for literacy, and 20 minutes later, they might go to a 3rd teacher where they're going for math. Module assessments with the power standards through stepping stones provides constant data for our teachers to really address those math standards. And again, just with literacy, every grade level knows where their goals are at. They're taking a look at what they need to do and what they need to address for target time. It's all kind of based around those power standards. So it's not a shot. It's not just like a blind shot in the dark. It's like, this is where kids are struggling. It's not even a feeling anymore. This is what the data says. And as an administrator sitting in on those meetings, knowing that this is what's coming up next because that's what the data says, good, bad, or indifferent, it's really nice to know that you're headed in the right direction. So
Before middle school and high school, interject, I would say though that one thing that is reality and that we really have to get better at is the universal instruction, so the tier 1 instruction to ensure for all students. So, and Lisa Misko, who used to be our Director of Student Services, used to always have this or say this to us when we would be doing our goals and action plans of, you really shouldn't be looking at those interventions until you've really solidified your universal instruction, and kind of the number that they use is like 80 to 85%. So if 80 to 85% haven't secured and aren't proficient, then those interventions are just a shot in the dark, and you've really then got to come back and look at what you're teaching for all students and making sure it's guaranteed and viable. So we know that we have work there in all of our subject areas as we continue our work then on those interventions as well.
Number one, I'm glad you asked the question, Heidi, because I think it's something that we all rack our brains with too, in regards to that, because we want it to be as best as it can be. I think it always is interesting when we look at goals and we say 70% or 80%, well, why not 100%? And you can wrangle with that. I guess to me it's more about the spirit of the work than it is about the number, I guess. With that, I think that it's one of those things where Jenny kind of took the piece that I was going to go at was the universal. I think we've done a lot of real quality and good right work with the power standards and then answering those 4 questions of the PLCs of what we want kids to know and what are we going to do if they're not, and how are we going to know all of that. And then I think with that though, it's almost like in athletics where there's a bye week. I think we have to self-scout ourselves a little bit and do a better job of like, okay, we pick these power standards in English language arts. Are those the right power standards that we're focusing on? Because we can always get better at that, like really evaluate that. And Lindsay shared with us, I think it was last week, I wanted to say roadmap, but it's heat map of, over the course of time with the Ford exam, using that measurement, what percent of, in these themes or these areas, these are the types of questions that they ask on that assessment. Well, in relationship to our power standards, we should make sure that those are matching up, that we're supporting the kids with what we're saying are important things to know and be able to do to be successful in that grade level or the next grade level, but how does that match up with how the kids are being assessed on this state assessment? If the assessment drives what we want to do, like, we have to have that conversation. With that, I think one of the things that I'm most proud of in the last 3 years is we've rolled out a standard-based reporting for a whole building now. And really, you know, when other districts have done that, where it's student and each specific standard, other districts, there's lots of contention of going away from A, Bs, and Cs and Ds, because, you know, what's an 82%? This year is the first year that we have all of our kids in our building that are, will be reported out in a 6-8 level based on standards. So I think that's a strength, because now I know what Hayden Fullerton, when I got his first quarter report card or progress report, I knew where he was at, and where he's a 2, and he's a 2 in some things. You know, if he had an 82%, I'd say, oh good, you got a B. And I think that helps, because I've been in IEP meetings and other meetings with families where it's like, I know what he needs or she needs to work on, and that's a positive. Then it's how do we utilize our time? So, you know, our time in our universal instruction, number one, shoring that up. You know, over the course of time, we've hired in literacy a couple of elementary teachers, you know, that have kind of that workshop model philosophy, and how can we continue to branch off on their knowledge and help make us stronger there. We also have, we hired someone with more of a secondary lens that has a reading specialist degree. How can that come into play and be best practices? And then getting down into some of the interventions when we use EduClimber and we know what kids are missing, is then how can we use our intervention, our go time, to help kids that are struggle, or, and this is something we gotta get better at, is enrich kids that really wanna fly in different areas too. That's one thing too that we're a little different at the middle school is, you know, there are a lot of intermediate schools that continue with that elementary model of longer chunks of time in literacy and math, and we say, no, we're going equal with, we're given science and social studies, so the 6th graders are dissecting perch the other day and sea lampreys today, and you know, so you go from 80 or 90 minutes to 55 of English language arts, but that's where, Jess, when you said, how can you support in art, we had those very same conversations with all of our teams on how can, it's not a comm arts teacher's job to bring up the literacy scores, it's all of our jobs to do that. And so how can art help, and how can, you know, in health, how can they, you know, do that, or in science, using claims and evidence and reasoning in their writing, and but I think it's one of those, as we shore up that universal, continue to do that, is then how can we continue to expand those kids that want to fly in certain things, and you know, how can we help support kids that struggle? And I'm sorry I'm being long-winded, so.
No, I appreciate it, thank you.
And trying not to be as long-winded. I'm not gonna try to, my goal is not to replicate anything that Curtis and Pat said, but it does start with the PLC work, and they talked a lot about the PLC work, the 4 critical questions, answering those things is part of the process. It goes to the beginning of the year, flash forward, flash back on what the power standards were, so we can see where maybe students were lagging and address those as we move through this school year. At the high school level, getting to the part of the question of what are some of the things we're doing. This year we implemented HMH as a universal screener for our literacy area. HMH, that's the company name.
Growth measure.
It's a growth measurement tool in the area of reading, which we didn't have a full-scale measurement tool. It's a relatively quick process. We can get a lot of data real quick, which helps us. And in particular, we also added a LST at the high school level, and her main focus is literacy. So that's helping her better identify students of need, but it's also helping our 9th and 10th grade English teams differentiate learning in the classroom, direct their reading instruction based on the abilities of the students, not just based on, hey, we like reading Harry Potter, bad example, but reading Harry Potter every year because that's our pet book. No, we're looking at what's best for the needs of the students. And likewise, you know, we're always trying to improve our scores. That's the nature of the beast. But when you take a look at the ACT, which is unfortunately the benchmark, there's a huge motivation piece to taking the ACT. At the end of the day, it's still a college entrance exam. And the needs of the workforce, or culturally speaking, that could play a huge factor, especially on that top end of what the results are going to be on the ACT. And historical data has shown that the larger number of students that are choosing, before they even take the ACT, that they want to take the path of college, will have a huge influence on what your ACT scored. So I'm probably letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, because I don't know if Jenny shared this information, but middle school and high school are working on alternative report cards, or scorecards, which take a look at other factors like student, so we can better assess ourselves, not devaluing the ACT and the ACT Aspire, for example, because they're valuable data points, but it's not taking into consideration how many students are taking AP classes and getting A's, B's, and C's. It's not taking into consideration the college credit courses. It's not taking into consideration the kids that are going out and getting industry credentials before they leave high school. So we're working on putting another assessment tool, so we can self-evaluate ourselves, but we can also brag about the direction our school district's moving outside of just one test score, which is ultimately based on a college entrance exam.
There's actually a session at WASB, I think CISA 7 kind of is leading the charge, so it's redefining ready. So that's kind of what Steve is talking about, that they've been working on. So you might want to pick up on that session, I think Wednesday afternoon. They're having a meeting. I think that's what's on my calendar, so.
In the previous data, we kind of talked about, and you mentioned this, so it made me think of it. You have that ACT, which is a motivating, driving factor for some of the high school students. We talked about at the elementary level, kids are easily amenable to incentives. And then you get to the middle school, and that seems to be kind of that lull time.
Sorry.
And
That's my tile on my keys. I found them. I lean to the left and it hits button.
and so at that middle school level, that incentive piece seems to not be as prevalent as at the lower level and maybe the high school level. And so what I was interested, you touched upon the fact that you really like the standards-based learning. Have you noticed a lack of incentive from the student perspective when they don't get a grade in their classes?
Can you just say your question again? Have I seen a lack of what
Like,
from kids?
you know, like grades are an easy measure for students to say, this is where I kind of land in a class, right? When they get that A, B, C, D. With the standards base, when they're getting the numbers that don't necessarily correlate exactly right, have you noticed any difference in student attitude about how they approach their work?
My response will be very global, so there'll be examples that'll be all over the place. I would say that early, like how we transitioned to this approach, kids, we started with the current 8th graders when they were coming out of 5th grade, they didn't have anything different. So it's never like we've gone from kids that were getting a letter grade to this, so it's just been their normal. Now, if I would have said that 3 years ago we're doing it school-wide and we had 8th graders that, you know, I want the A, I think it would have been a stronger negative response to that because we would have just done it point blank and they had seen other things and they're motivated by something called an A. I think what is a real positive about it, and I'll use that example of being able to conference with kids and teachers conferencing with kids and talking about, okay, you're at a 2 right now, that's okay because we're at this point in the school year, but how are we going to get you to be at that place of being a 3 or a 4 down the road? And what do you need to do and how are we going to utilize our time to do that? Hayden Fullerton, I'll use him as an example, was a 2. He was in Go Time with Jenny Stalick today, or yesterday, and then today they took an assessment and Jenny said to me, hey, did Hayden tell you about how he did on his assessment today? I said, no, he didn't. And he goes, well, ask him. Okay, I will. And, you know, hey, Hayden, how did you do on your math assessment today? Oh, we had a math assessment? And he said, oh, Miss Stalick said I did really well on it. And, you know, so I think it provides more of a in-depth opportunity for our teachers and our kids to talk. I think it provides parents an opportunity to talk versus if Hayden would have said he got a B, he may have had an 85% or whatever, but he may not know how to add fractions because he got none of those right, but he got everything else right. And it's so, you know, so I think there's better depth in the possibility. Is it utopia? No. We got to continue to build on what does that mean when you're a 2 and how do you, and our teachers are getting, our 6th grade teachers they're in their 3rd year, our 8th grade teachers are in their 1st year. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but at least we're, you know, going down the right track.
I would add too that the research says that a letter grade really means nothing to students. I mean, they've done a lot of research on that, but when, if there's a letter grade and a comment, it's better, but the research really says that it's the comments that drive the feedback for the student and help them to make the improvement, so. So I think that's why the standards-based report card really, for students is the way to go. Parents are the ones who probably struggle with it more because they are used to seeing that letter grade or they received it and, you know, and that's been what's been used to rank and order students, and so. The other thing that middle school has done and elementary was doing was separated kind of the compliance or the life skills from the academic grade. So elementary for years has had the life skills at the top of their report card or mixed in or separated out for the specials. And then middle school 2 years ago was the first year that we moved and we really started to focus on when you get that number or that letter grade, it's only focused on academic and what students are able to do in the academics. And then there's that life skill that goes along with your participation, your cooperation, your teamwork. And what else do we have in there? Problem solving, you know, those types of things. So I think, you know, we'll gradually continue that work.
I think the other piece too, just to paint like a classroom for you, it would, is that when you go into a classroom now, you know, the power standards are there. Students are talking in that authentic vocabulary all the time. They know that that's the focus. So with a letter grade, it's like Pat had said, they just thought of it as math. I got a B in math, as opposed to this is what we're actually working on. This is the power standard. This is how I'm doing within this piece of the learning in math. And so I think that for parents, and I always thought this was a just extremely unique situation because my background is early childhood, kindergarten, and I always thought of myself, that my job, I always wanted to be a kindergarten teacher, and because I knew that parents were so interested in all of those skills, right? I mean, it was a kindergarten report card is the best report card in the world because it tells you exactly what your child is doing. And that now has really, that's how we've grown in education, because now we're really telling you exactly what your 6th grader, your 7th grader, your 8th grader is doing in math. We're not just saying that they can, you know, add 2 numbers together. We're talking specifically about that power standard. So when you go in a classroom and that learning target is there, and then you can go to a student and you can ask them what they're doing, and they can talk to you about what they're actually learning, and they can put it back in that vocabulary. It's such an easier conversation. I know they still don't come home and talk about it, but they still tell you they've learned nothing today, but we really can now see whether they're growing in their learning. And so I think it's a great way, because they don't know any different, right? I mean, they've been getting the standards based all the way through, so it's great to see that we're moving away from that and moving to a better, a deeper way for kids to learn.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. I know Pat, you had mentioned just a little bit about, you know, those lagging skills with social emotional. And I know nationwide, they've been talking about mental health and students and the effects that the pandemic has had. How has it been challenging to balance that academic interventions and then for our students that are struggling social emotionally, like providing, you know, is there, you know, there's never enough time in the day. So how do you balance that, making sure that we're providing for students that need more connections, or, you know, need some more of that, you know, for behavior or, you know, social.
Has it been a challenge? Yes,
Yeah.
it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
I think it's one kid at a time based on what they do. Had a student the other day having a meltdown, chairs were going, just needed to let that out, and then I asked him, can I give you a half hug? You know, just, and he, yeah. One of those, you know, at a time. And, you know, then what services can we have to help support, you know, him or her in regards to, you know, what's next? And I think it's some of the you know, the unfinished learning, it's the stamina, you know, school stamina. I mean, it's just different, you know, I mean, we're building that. And So is it hard? Yes. Are people stepping up and understanding that? That can be frustrating, yep. But they also care about their kiddos, so I'm sure that's elementary, middle, and high school.
And Megan, just to kind of piggyback off of that, I would say that's absolutely been like my soapbox, I would say. It's just like, we have to acknowledge, recognize, and work with our behaviors that we're seeing on a daily basis. And it is, you know, our 3-year-olds all the way up to our 21-year-olds. And meeting them where they're at. I would say we have some new ideas and skills. That we have a social worker that has been just an amazing addition for us. You know, and she's worked in some of our elementary, our middle, and our high school buildings, so it's been really quite nice to have just a different set of eyes, a different resource. But that we all know that you can't learn until you support that behavior and recognize and understand that behavior, and again, meet the kid where they're at.
No, I think having the social worker is, I think that's gotta be, because we've had, it's been so many years since we've had somebody in staff, so I think it's great. Another good addition.
Have we seen more or different types of behavioral challenges this year because of that? I see people nodding already, okay, so, because of the you know, the time in virtual and.
We've talked a lot just in student services, and again, it affects all kids, but really, like I said, meeting kids where they're at, but also what tools can we put in our teachers' toolboxes? What can we think about differently? How can we think outside of that toolbox to help support those kids? Because there are different behaviors, and kids just need a space to talk and to be heard. So I think that those are all things, kind of going back to that school culture slide of relationships are number one, and I think relationships will always be number one.
Anything else? All right, good discussion, thank you for all the information. Let's see where we are, I think that's it. That is it. Our next meeting is January 26th, which is a week later than it would have been because convention is the week before. I'll be at convention, I think Heidi and Sarah will be there as well. In addition to the agenda items that are currently shown, we'll probably have something on facilities. And I don't know, are we gonna be ready to talk about any of the ESSER stuff at that time, or have any sort of report on that? Yes, so we'll have that too. Any other?
We'll have early grads as well.
Early. All right, that'll be a closed session thing then. Anything else that anybody has regarding that? Okay, we do have a closed session requested, so we'll need a motion to convene in a closed session specifically to consider school emergency operations and crisis response plans per statute 19851B and 304.061 EG and 304.061 EM, and also specifically to discuss employee leave request per 19851C.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimously carried. We will see you on the 26th.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Well, sorry, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Happy holidays.